But we begin with an interesting conversation. Danny, we said, like who would be the greatest, portal, non-quarterback portal addition. We were talking about Caleb Downs, like Georgia was the expected landing point. You reunite with, the secondary coach, co-defensive coordinator, T-Rob, who got you there. And goodness gracious, he joins the juggernaut that Ryan Day is assembling in Columbus. Do we just want to go all Ohio State here? Do you think that Caleb Downs is individually the biggest piece of this, or is he just like part of the big Ohio State storyline? Because we got a lot going on right here.
I mean, this is super team territory, right? What they're developing with some of the stars that are there.
Yes.
It's Tom rolls his eyes. It's all LeBron James' fault. It's all these super teams are all LeBron James' fault. But as a Miami Heat fan, I loved it when they came my way down to South Beach. It's the collective. It's all of them. Pun intended with collective.
Yeah.
This is just the latest in the moves they've already been making. And now it seems like Will Howard is an afterthought. Like Will Howard's like a side piece in all of this. When Quinshon Judkins coming, Caleb Downs, you already mentioned, we didn't even talk about Julian Sayin, who's going to add some depth to that quarterback room. It is off the charts what they're doing. This is the all-in move. I think this is the blessing in disguise for whatever reason. And Bill O'Brien, like we haven't even got, like there's so many changes. This absolutely 100% is Ohio State going all in, saying it is beat Michigan. It is win the Big Ten. It is get to the national championship or bust. There is no question about it, which I do think puts added pressure on Ryan Day. As much as there already was, this is more pressure on him.
Yeah, they're all in. They have to win next year. And it's, I wrote about this last week. It's, you look at the situation. I mean, we talked about how Ryan Day was on the hot seat after losing to Michigan last year, but then they still came within basically a field goal of probably winning a national title. Because I think if Ohio State gets past Georgia, considering what Georgia did to TCU, there's a good reason to think they would have beaten TCU the following week. But didn't happen. So hot seat coming into the year, you lose to Michigan again. And then not only do you lose to Michigan, you have to go watch them win a national title. And maybe it's better for them long term, because as we've seen with the work they've done in the portal, they clearly, somebody got a fire lit up under their ass to go donate some money to help get some players to bring into this roster to give them a better chance of competing and beating Michigan next year and winning a national title. But I think the moves they've made are outstanding. I think Caleb Downs is a great player. And I think you throw him onto that defense, which was already very good, and getting a whole lot of key players back already. And it's going to be, I mean, right now, early running for best defense in the country next season. I think Ohio State has to be your favorite for that spot. Although I think Georgia will give them a rush. And I think Michigan's defense will still be pretty good. But on the other side, what's different? Ohio State's defense was really good this year. Offensively, they weren't as explosive as they wanted to be. They didn't, like I've talked about this a billion times already, but Kyle McCord caught a lot of heat. I don't think Kyle McCord was the biggest problem with that offense. I think the offensive line was the biggest problem with that offense. Is the offensive line any better? They bring in the center from Alabama, who everybody was blaming for the loss to Michigan because he can't snap, but he's going to be fine at Ohio State. They're changing their philosophy on offense. They're clearly going to a power rushing attack instead of being like a spread it out and throw it all over the place. And maybe that'll be good in the long term. But it's just, there's plenty of reason to be optimistic. But at the same time, I'm not convinced that Ohio State is suddenly going to be great, even if they are a quote unquote super team. They're a super team on defense. Offensively, you can't be a super team with an offensive line that's played as poorly as they have. They've got the skill position players, but they had those guys the last few years and didn't really seem to matter too much. So I understand the excitement. I'm still in a wait and see approach for how it turns out. And then the Bill O'Brien hire, little odd, I think. Like Alabama fans are, you can ask them how they felt about Bill O'Brien, who had the #1 pick at QB. He had Jahmyr Gibbs at running back. I don't know if you watched him yesterday in the playoffs for the Lions, completely destroying dudes. Have a lot of talent on those teams, but they didn't really seem to, overcome better teams. So I don't know. Nick Saban didn't seem really like a huge fan of Bill O'Brien, but I also think that part of that, the idea of hiring Bill O'Brien might be related to the fact that, are you really going to be the play caller? I'm just going to float this out. Last year, we talked about a program spent a lot of money to get players in. Head coach was the primary play caller, received a lot of heat for his play calling. Job was open. He's going to bring in a new play caller, new OC, brings him in. We're finally going to get over the hump. We're finally going to beat the boogeyman. We're finally going to beat Alabama. That school was Texas A&M. Does that sound anything like exactly what's happening at Ohio State right now? They're spending a bunch of money bringing in players. The head coach, who hasn't been able to get over the Michigan hump, is bringing in a new play caller. But the candidate pool is a little different because nobody's really all that sure how much of an autonomy they're going to have running the offense. I don't know. It's just the players they've gotten are great. I think Ohio State will be the favorite in the Big Ten. I think they should be the favorite in the Big Ten next year. But I'm just not convinced it's going to fix everything.
No. You are making way too much sense for January 22nd. I want hype. I want storylines. I don't want to hear about is the offensive line fixed. I just want to see all of those yards and all of those touchdowns collected together because Quinshon Judkins, but Travion Henderson is back as well. Emeka Egbuka, like you really are dealing with a super team status. Now, last year, they only lost one regular season game. And we are adding in all these pieces. And will it be enough to make it so that they win that last game, the one that matters more than anything? If the offensive line is fixed, maybe not. Oh, and by the way, your Texas A&M, they also hired Texas A&M's AD. Mm-hmm. Texas A&M North is in Columbus, where they are spending bukus of money, assembling talent, and just hoping it works out. Because throwing money at the problem always has worked throughout the history of time, and especially with college football. Now, I want to be clear. I think this is awesome. I think this is fun. And I think in the context of Michigan winning a national championship, the idea that Ohio State, the program that has been since Michigan last won a national championship, Ohio State has been more successful consistently. And so, fair? Yeah, okay, yeah. Good. And so to see that Buckeyes program and that fan base be so insulted at the idea that you've been jumped, that you just rally your resources and your support like this, I do not necessarily believe all of the big air quotes reporting that went into that website that Lane Kiffin shared on Twitter, as Lane Kiffin jumped on Twitter to share a link to a unconfirmed report that said Ohio State has spent $13 million. But the Dodd father, Dennis Dodd, conveniently jumped in to say, that's actually the exact number that Ryan Day used when they asked him to estimate how much money they needed to pull together in order to retain and attract talent.
That was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We got inflation. There's no way. I think it's way more than 13 million, right? I mean, that was 2 years ago. Has anybody tried to buy groceries recently? I mean, this is way more. This is way pricier than buying groceries. This is
what costs more, milk or Caleb Downs?
That's right. Do you think I'd love to know, because I mean, the Caleb Downs to Georgia did make so much sense.
So much,
right?
Yes.
How much more of an offer do you think it was? Because I mean, it has to be about the money, right? I mean, you can win, you can be successful anywhere. Is it 1.5 times? Is it double the offer? Like, what's the number that's too good for him to refuse that Georgia walks away from and says, because granted, Georgia, I think they showed some restraint with Bear Alexander. They were like, oh, okay, you go take the bag. You got to get it. Go get yours. I think they're smart. I think they have resources where they could match any offer, but I'd love to know how much more it took for Caleb Downs to go to Ohio State.
I don't think it took that much more. I think if you're Caleb Downs, you look at Georgia, like you're probably going to start there, but there's not, you have a lot of depth there. I think at Ohio State, that you're the unquestioned starter in that defense. Whereas you look at Georgia, like even without Caleb Downs, they still got 2 pretty good safeties. So it's a weird situation. I don't know how much Georgia, I think we certainly connected Georgia to it right away for obvious reasons. I don't know how much interest Georgia really had. It might have been Ohio State that was just making the actual significant offer. And Georgia was probably like, well, if you want to come, we can get you, but it's not going to be at full rate. So from that perspective, yeah, but I don't think Ohio State had to overbid. I just think Ohio State was probably the best situation to them, and they had a nice bid. Also, I want to say to the chat who are not taking the Texas A&M comp kindly, Ohio State's in a much better situation than Texas A&M. I'm not comparing where you are as programs. I'm comparing the situation with the head coach and your fact that you're kind of loading up and going for it because you feel the pressure, which is exactly why Jimbo did it last offseason.
By the way, the 4 schools that Caleb Downs visited prior to his commitment to Alabama, Georgia, Notre Dame, and Ohio State. So we mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think that there are lots of different ways to read the Bill O'Brien hire. Number one, Ryan Day is adding a voice with a presence. Like when it's Ryan Day and it's Brian Hartline, that's still Ryan Day's offense, right? No matter what you say, no matter what tags you're putting on it. But you bring in Bill O'Brien, and you are bringing in a former head coach at Penn State and for the Houston Texans, somebody who's been an offensive coordinator for a Heisman Trophy winner in Bryce Young and at Alabama and worked for Nick Saban. The experience that he brings is valuable. So, Tom, how should Ohio State fans be fired up about the hire of Bill O'Brien?
No. I mean, not you shouldn't be upset about it, but I don't know if you'd be fired up about it. Like, it's an offensive coordinator. It's not going to be the play calling that determines how good Ohio State's season is next year. It's just the players going to have to play well. But I do think, like, I mentioned earlier in the show, Alabama fans were very happy to see Bill O'Brien leave. I don't know how fair that was, considering Alabama scored like 40 points per game while he was there, but it's one of those things. Like, Bill O'Brien is not a bad offensive coordinator. He's had success at both levels doing so. He had success as the head coach at Penn State when they were in a terrible situation when he had Christian Hackenberg, and Hackenberg was a good player for them. He's probably, he did not progress the way they wanted to, but he was a solid starter. He's one of the better starters they've had for a while. So I think when you look at it, yeah, he's a competent OC. He's going to come in, and as you kind of talked about there, Chip, he's got ideas. He knows what works. He's going to be somebody for Ryan Day. The two of them can get together and maybe come up with some stuff. And I also think that for Ryan Day, one of the complaints Ohio State fans have had about him for years is, how he abandons the run game. And the run game that Ohio State has not been as effective as it should be, considering that the talent they've had there, and also the fact that with the receivers they had, it's not like defenses can key against the run. But again, I think that comes back to the offensive line. But at the same time, if you talk to Alabama fans, they weren't very fond of the run game with Bill O'Brien in Tuscaloosa. And, they didn't like the way he used Jahmyr Gibbs and the players he had. So I don't know. I don't think this fixes anything. I don't think it hurts anything. I think it's another experienced coach on the staff, like you said, who's a voice in the room, can figure things out. And also, they're completely changing their offensive identity. This is part of it. Will it work? I don't know.
Yeah, you compared him to Texas A&M somewhat, saying it feels similar. I mean, it also kind of feels similar to what, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma and USC. An offensive-minded coach he's had more success, especially. But, I mean, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma was getting to the playoffs almost every year and couldn't get over the hump. Like Ryan Day is right there, just can't get past Michigan. Offensive-minded coach, takes criticism about physicality, and it affects both sides of the ball. I mean, that's why Ryan Day went off on Lou Holtz. He thought he answered everybody's questions about physicality because they won a game that they maybe should have lost in that game. Like he was, I mean, that was a great drive. That was Kyle McCord's swan song there, leading them down the field. But that's where I wonder if this does bring in just another mentality that I do think is necessary. I think he's been great with quarterbacks that he's developed, which is a good sign. Like he was great with Christian Hackenberg when he took over that Penn State gig. I thought it was interesting too that Julian Sayin, who is now there, he recruited and was one of the big reasons why Sayin was going to Alabama.
Great call.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that of course helps to get another player, another voice in the room. I think this quarterback competition is going to be pretty fascinating to watch because I like Will Howard. I think he's an upgrade over Kyle McCord. But they've got 2 5-stars in there, and Aaron Nolan, and from the same class. And they also have Devin Brown. Like, I totally forgot about him. I was interviewing Bill Rabinowitz from the Columbus Dispatch this morning on the radio show. And I was like, and I totally forgot about Devin Brown. He's like, oh, yeah, by the way, he's in the mix too. So the way he handles this quarterback room, the way he, decides who's going to be starting, tailors it around him. And the other thing to point out too is the offense they were 14 points per game less than the year prior. Like, it's a pretty big drop off in production. And, Kyle McCord took a lot of brunt of that criticism, but I think there's blame to go all around. So I give Ryan Day credit for kind of self-scouting and saying, all right, here you go. Let's try something new. Let me focus on being the figurehead. Maybe part of that is establishing a culture that's more physical.
I like this comment from Buckeye01. He says, he's our new Kevin Wilson, someone who has the pull to tell Ryan Day to run the ball when Day wants to pass.
Right.
It's a useful thing to have. I think I don't know how much of an impact Devin Brown's going to have in any quarterback play for I mean, it's not another thing about
is Howard the quarterback? And then you've just got
I think so.
And so if you're Devin Brown, you're out after spring practice.
I think probably. I mean,
he almost got benched by Avery Johnson. Like that, Kansas State was ready to move on from him after 4 or 5 games. They played him both. He played his way out of it. Like, I like his skill set. I was very high on him coming after the Big 12 championship year when he split reps with Adrian Martinez. Like, as the passer, he's there. I think he's really athletic. I think he does a lot in the run game that people probably don't give him credit for. But I think it'll be an interesting competition. Like, I would say day one starter, who's it going to be? I would say Will Howard, but who finished the season? That might be another question.
Yeah, my thing with Will Howard, and this is maybe an area Bill O'Brien can help him with, but like the vertical passing to me just isn't there, especially when you look at the context of what the Ohio State offense has been the last few years. There's a whole lot of verticality to that passing game. But back to Devin Brown, like, availability is a huge thing, and Devin Brown just hasn't shown the ability to stay healthy. So I think that Sayin coming in is just kind of like the final. When you look at the Nolan, the Keinels, those guys on that depth chart, I think Devin Brown's days in Columbus are probably limited.
Yeah, and Lincoln Kienholz too. Do they have a starting basketball team of scholarship quarterbacks who are blue chip prospects?
They do, yeah.
Don't forget, they have 13 million. I mean, and it's probably way more.
This is nothing new. I mean, they went from Justin Fields to CJ Stroud. They had Joe Burrow. They had Quinn Ewers. It's not like this Ohio State QB room has ever had a dearth of talent in it.
So yeah, that's true. The players there, because we don't have a head coaching change, can't leave until the spring window. So they will all be in spring practice, at least if they are enrolled. I don't know about the newbies and where they are in terms of whether they're going to be on campus in time for spring practice. But
I can't even figure out the calendar because Sayin was in Tuscaloosa, right? Like, did he attend any class?
He was enrolled. This is a transfer. This is not like a flip. This is a
and now the new rule, like the new NCAA, like it probably doesn't even hurt him that bad, right? He's not going to lose any year.
Correct.
Or lose a transfer because they can just go as many times they want.
Ooh.
So with that, that's what I'm wondering, because they did have that ruling that kind of flew under the radar with basketball where they challenged the multiple, transfer one. I think the NCAA threw in the towel. I think these guys are going to be able to transfer as much as they want. There is something I don't know. I'll have to find this out. If he can compete in the spring, because there is something about the same calendar, like the school calendar.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that prohibits him from actually I would be shocked if he's not out there competing in the spring.
You know who should be on the roster in the spring? Because they got to replace a couple linebackers. The woman who knocked over Caitlin Clark, that was a hit right there. She should be getting a shot to walk on and play linebacker. She's a violent finisher with the ball carrier.
Tommy Eichenberg to the lady who knocked Caitlin Clark to the floor.
But it wasn't that hard of a hit. I mean, it was a pretty good flop too. Oh, let's get into it.
Hey, did y'all do that on the radio this morning? Flop or not? Caitlin Clark going down.
Yes. Oh, we spent an hour on it for sure. That's why we had Chris Hassel on. Remember, Hassel's our expert on all things Iowa.